Krista Ann Baker was born to Pastor Winfred Baker and Patsy Ann Baker in Laurel and Jones County, Mississippi, on November 27, 1983. She was the youngest child in the family. Krista had two older brothers. In 1991, the Baker family relocated to Abita Springs, Louisiana, where they constructed their church, and Krista actively participated in its operations. Engaging in ministry from an early age, she embarked on numerous world trips with Christian missionary organizations to extend her service to others, particularly children, expressing her anticipation for starting her own family. Krista was homeschooled and pursued a degree in Christian education through online courses at North Tennessee Bible Institute. She loved serving people. She loved children and thought about starting her own family. However, even though she dreamed of getting married one day, she put her faith above everything else. Her commitment to traditional values was evident as she saved herself and adhered to the principle of dating only with the intention of marriage. Despite this, she cultivated beautiful friendships, including one with Cootie Alexander, a fellow youth pastor. Cootie was a very charismatic person. He was very popular in his community. Together with Krista, he made several missionary trips. Krista and Cootie's families met through the church and were on good terms. After many years of friendship, Cootie asked Winfred Baker for permission to marry Krista, and her father gladly agreed. In their relationship before the wedding, Cootie and Krista adhered to church traditions and excluded intimate contact with each other. Krista told her parents that she wanted her first kiss with Cootie to happen at the altar. While Krista was helping her parents at church, Cootie was studying to be a paramedic. A year later, they decided it was time to tie the knot. They said their vows on March 1, 2008, in front of the church parishioners and members of their families. They were happy. Krista was a wonderful bride, and it was a long-awaited day for her. But unfortunately, just 4 months after the wedding, she was found dead. Around 6 a.m. on June 29, 2008, Cootie returned home from the night shift and found Krista lying face down on the floor. By the time Cootie found her, she was already dead. He immediately called the police. Krista's body was lying to the left of the front door, and there were no signs of a struggle on her body. There was a bullet hole in the back of her head. Experts believed that the shot was fired at very close range, as there were burn marks on Krista's skin. It indicated that the gun was almost at the back of her head at the time of the shot. Police found a 9mm shell casing on the floor next to the body. Investigators suggested that it could have been a robbery that went wrong. Perhaps someone had broken into the house thinking no one was there. Maybe this person decided to get rid of Krista as a witness. When examining all the rooms, investigators noticed signs of someone searching the house. There was a jewelry box on the bed. Someone had broken the gun cabinet. Krista's purse was on the kitchen table, and it looked like the perpetrator was looking for something inside it. Many drawers and cabinets were open. All these signs indicated that the perpetrator was looking for something valuable. When the police finished searching the house, they needed to interview everyone with access to it. And the first person they talked to was Krista's husband, Cootie Alexander. He was upset and crying, so the investigators had to wait for him to calm down and be able to answer their questions. Cootie told investigators everything was fine the night before he went to work. He had overnight shifts as an EMT with Acadian Ambulance. He called Krista several times during the night, but she wasn't answering her phone. He sent her several text messages, but Krista didn't respond to those messages either. He thought she was tired and fell asleep. However, when he returned home in the morning, he immediately noticed that the front door to their house was slightly ajar. Going inside, he saw scattered things and Krista lying on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head. He checked her pulse and realized that she was dead. After this, he immediately called 911. Investigators were trying to figure out who might have come to the house while Cootie was at work. Perhaps the perpetrator waited until Krista was alone. They also wanted to find out if Krista could have let the criminal into the house herself. The absence of signs of a struggle in the house and on her body could indicate that she knew the person who took her life. Perhaps she did not feel the danger and thus did not have time to resist. Cootie told investigators that a rifle and a shotgun were missing from the gun cabinet. He also said that Krista was not the only victim of this crime. She was 17 weeks pregnant. Therefore, he lost not only his wife, but also their unborn child. He was devastated and had no idea how to live his life. Now, there were 2 victims in the case instead of 1. The crime scene seemed strange to the investigators. The mess in the house didn't make any sense. The cabinets and drawers were open, but at the same time, there was no sign that anyone had been rummaging through them. It didn't look like anyone was searching for anything in them. Perhaps by doing so, the person who took Krista's life wanted to confuse the police. The same applied to the jewelry box. It was open, but the jewelry itself was not missing. It was very, very suspicious. Krista's purse was open, but all the valuables were still there. Cootie said 2 weapons were missing from the house. It also seemed strange. After all, they had more weapons in the house, but the criminal took only 2 of them for some reason. Investigators started wondering why he didn't take all of them. Considering all of the above, the investigators concluded that they were dealing with a staged crime scene. It looked like whoever did this intended to take the life of Krista Alexander, but decided to stage it as a robbery. The police started interviewing the couple's neighbors in search of potential witnesses. As a result, they got an unexpected lead. Mavis Rabelais, 69, the Alexanders' next-door neighbor and landlord, described the couple as quiet newlyweds who married in March and were active members of the Fundamental Baptist Church. Rabelais described Krista Alexander as a sweet, kind, helpful woman who rarely went into the yard outside her tan brick house without her husband. "It's just unbelievable that somebody would want to harm her. You just don't expect something like this out here," Rabelais said. Rabelais added that she last saw the couple Saturday afternoon when Cootie Alexander was collecting the bodies of the turtles he had shot the previous weekend in his backyard pond. Thus, investigators learned from a neighbor that Cootie had a gun. However, no gun was found in the home of Cootie and Krista. Plus, Cootie said that the only weapons stolen from the house were a rifle and a shotgun. He never mentioned a gun. Now, the detectives wanted to learn what Cootie was hiding. They went to the pond area, examined everything, and found several 9mm shell casings in the grass. They looked the same as the one found next to Krista's body. The police sent all the casings to the state crime lab for comparison. The report left no doubt that the gun used by Cootie to shoot at the turtles was the same gun used to shoot at Krista. Investigators called Cootie to the police station for further questioning. He claimed that there was no way he could have shot his wife. He said he left for work at about 5 p.m. on Saturday, June 28, 2008, and returned at about 6 a.m. the next day. His alibi was that he was on duty all night. Investigators talked to his colleagues, and they confirmed Cootie's alibi. He spent the whole night at work. When asked about the gun, Cootie said he did have a gun, but he sold it a day before the incident. According to him, a stranger named Steve bought a gun from him for $500. Steve paid in cash, so it was hard to verify this story. Cootie described Steve as a white male, about 35 years old, about 6 feet 1 inch tall, driving an old pickup truck, presumably a Toyota. Investigators talked to Krista's parents, and they said they didn't believe Cootie's story. According to Winfred Baker, Krista's father, her death did not have an emotional impact on Cootie. Moreover, her father believed Cootie's indifference began a few months before the wedding. After Krista and Cootie started to live together, they experienced financial difficulties. The child they were expecting could also affect their financial situation. Krista's parents also told investigators that they suspected Cootie was cheating on his wife. A few weeks before her death, Krista told friends that she suspected Cootie was in a relationship with another woman. This woman was his colleague, and she was even among the guests at their wedding. The more investigators learned about the marriage of Krista and Cootie Alexander, the more they became convinced that Cootie and Krista had different plans for the future. But was this a strong enough motive to take the life of the mother of his unborn child? The only lead the police had was a man named Steve, to whom Cootie claimed he had sold the gun used to shoot Krista. The police started looking for this man, and the description given by Cootie was supposed to help in this. At the same time, the investigators questioned Cootie again, asking him to tell in more detail what he did before going to work, while on duty, and after he returned home. This time, his story was different from what he had said earlier. He talked about how he spent the day before going to work, but never mentioned a man named Steve, who was allegedly at his house and to whom he sold a gun. It also seemed strange to the investigators that, while on duty, Cootie did not worry about Krista's well-being after she did not answer his calls. He knew that she was pregnant and that she was home alone. He could have asked one of the family members to check on her, but he didn't. The fact that someone had staged the crime scene was also not in Cootie's favor. Realizing that Cootie couldn't get his story straight, the investigators started pressuring him, trying to get the truth out of him. In the end, after several hours of interrogation, he told a completely different story. But was he telling the truth? Now, he claimed that he slept before going to work. Alexander said he had gone to sleep on the couch, and his wife was late waking him up for the ambulance night shift. "I was in a rush. I wasn't mad at her for waking me up late. It definitely wasn't an issue," Alexander said. He walked around the house holding a gun in his hand because he was going to take it with him to work. One of his colleagues wanted to see it and maybe buy it. He walked around with a gun, aiming at various objects and repeating, "Click, click." Fooling around, he approached Krista from behind, put a gun to the back of her head, and at that moment, an accidental shot occurred. He claimed it was an accident. He said he didn't want to do it. When he realized that Krista was dead, he was scared and did not know what to do. He admitted that he decided to stage a crime scene to make it look like a robbery. Cootie took several items from the house, including weapons and a DVD player, and drove to work. He left the front door open. He hoped someone would see the open door and the lights on and call the police. He wanted someone to find Krista while he was at work, but his plan failed. On his way to work, Alexander said he threw the pistol and other items, such as his wife's jewelry, out the passenger side window. When he arrived at work, all he had left in the car was the DVD player and a Sony radio. He handed the DVD player to a female colleague named Allison Sharp. He also confirmed that he had an affair with this woman. Investigators questioned Allison Sharp, and she told them that her relationship with Cootie Alexander involved kissing and holding hands before and after his wedding. Sharp said she and Alexander once spent the night together in a Baton Rouge hotel. Sharp said she was stressed, and Alexander took her to the Callaway Inn to help her relax. Alexander paid for a suite with a jacuzzi. He brought china plates from his home and served a meal with wine, she said. At that time, Krista was in the church camp, and Cootie believed she would not find out anything about his unfaithfulness. He said he had financial problems. Alexander said he made $11 an hour and was having trouble passing a test that would have allowed him to earn more. Their washing machine was broken. Krista was not covered by health insurance and was unemployed. They lived in a rental home. Despite financial difficulties, Alexander agreed that he found the money to pay for the night with Sharp at Callaway Inn. Sharp claimed she had no idea that Cootie had taken his wife's life. Detectives established that she had nothing to do with the crime and thus released her without any charges. Although Cootie Alexander admitted that Krista died as a result of his actions, investigators did not believe that her death was an accident. It seemed rather strange that he was walking around the house with a gun, aiming at various objects. Even more bizarre was that he put the gun to the back of his pregnant wife's head. The next step for the police was to find the weapon of the crime, and they found the gun in the bushes by the road, exactly where Cootie said he threw it away. The ballistics examination confirmed that this gun was the weapon of the crime. They charged Cootie with second-degree life deprivation of his wife, first-degree feticide for the death of her unborn child, and obstruction of justice for allegedly staging a crime scene to make it appear as though there had been a burglary there. Investigators believed that Cootie had deliberately committed a crime to live with his mistress. He wanted to end his marriage, but Krista was pregnant. He did not want to become a parent, and therefore, without thinking about the consequences, decided to get rid of his wife and the child they were expecting. After the police arrested Cootie Alexander, Krista's parents found the strength to forgive him. The Baker family gathered to mourn after losing their baby girl, and what would have been their fourth grandchild. "She was a doll, I suppose you would say," said her father, Winfred Baker. Krista's friends and relatives, both close and distant, will remember her as a person who shared her life and a message. "She already did a total of 17 mission trips," her father said. Winfred Baker said he spoke with Cootie shortly before his arrest, and this is how he described their meeting. "We talked with him briefly right before he went back for another interview. It really wasn't much of a conversation. We hugged and cried together." Baker said, although he wants to see justice served, he's already forgiven Cootie. "Even before we knew who it was, we forgave him." Baker said that the only thing that comforted him was knowing that Krista was in a better place now. "Well, she's with the Lord. She's in heaven. She's in a better place," he said. The trial began on August 2, 2009. The prosecutors argued that Cootie Alexander's actions after he took the life of his pregnant wife proved that he acted intentionally. If it was an accident, why didn't he immediately call 911? Instead, he staged a robbery and left Krista's body for 12 hours before he returned from duty and finally called 911. The prosecutors also questioned his story that the shot was accidental. Cootie owned many weapons and, as witnesses testified, he knew how to handle them. His father taught him this. Defense attorney Louis Unglesby said, "My client is most grief-stricken by what happened, and he knows he made serious mistakes in the way he conducted himself. My client has never denied that he was involved in the death of his wife, who he dearly loved. He made some very bad decisions in the way he conducted himself." Cootie Alexander, 24, charged with the second-degree life deprivation of his wife, Krista, abruptly halted jury deliberations with a guilty plea. The breakthrough came, prosecutors said, when the victim's family agreed to a plea bargain that had long been on the table. In August 2009, the court sentenced Cootie Alexander to 55 years in prison.